welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into something that, well, trips up a lot of us. That link between the RBA cash rate and your mortgage. You know the common story, RBA hikes the rate, your bank follows because they're just passing on the cost. Sounds logical, but is it really that straightforward? Is that how it actually works mechanically? We've got this really fascinating document today that kind of challenges that whole idea. It digs into how money's actually created, how those mortgage rates are really set. Get ready for maybe a few surprises.
Absolutely. And our goal here is clarity. We want to isolate the real sort of nuts and bolts process behind lending. We're focusing on that very first step, the creation of the loan, the mortgage, and the deposit that comes with it. Primary transactions. Let's strip away the assumptions, see what's actually happening underneath.
Yeah, exactly. So if you've ever been confused, maybe frustrated, seeing rates move and wondering why, this one's definitely for you. We reckon you might have a few aha moments today. Okay, let's dive in. Here's a thought. What if banks don't actually lend out money they already have? Like, not your savings, not anyone else's deposits. What if they just, well, create it on the spot?
Right. It sounds a bit wild, doesn't it? It goes against that whole bank as intermediary idea we all grew up with. But that's precisely the core concept here, and it's not some secret. When a bank approves your loan, say your mortgage, it simultaneously creates a matching deposit in your account. It's just an accounting entry, keystrokes, basically.
Keystrokes. So they're adding an asset, the loan, and a liability, the deposit, to their books at the same time.
Exactly. Both sides of the balance sheet expand right then and there. And the critical thing, the bit people often miss, is that they don't need our deposits first. They don't need reserves from the RBA at that moment or money from other banks.
The money's just conjured.
In a way, yes. Created from nothing in the act of lending is the phrase sometimes used. It is the expansion of the money supply. And look, this isn't some fringe theory. The RBA themselves have said it. Their September 2018 bulletin states, deposits can also be created when financial intermediaries make loans. The process of extending loans will therefore typically create deposits at a system-wide level. Pretty clear.
Huh. Okay, so the RBA acknowledges this.
And not just in bulletins. Christopher Kent, an RBA assistant governor, said back in 2018, money can be created when financial intermediaries make loans. He explained how the bank credits the borrower's account and those funds become deposits somewhere in the system.
Right.
Even bank CEOs admit it. Matt Common from CBA at their 2022 AGM said, and I'm quoting here, "We also do create deposits in the system. We expand money supply when we lend money."
Wow. Okay, so they're not just middlemen moving existing money around. They're actually creating new money when they lend. That's a big shift in thinking.
Well, it really is. Foundational.
So if they create the money for the loan itself, what does that mean for their costs? Which naturally brings us straight to the RBA cash rate. We hear about it constantly. If banks just create loan money, then what is the cash rate actually doing? How does it even connect?
Okay, good question. The RBA cash rate is very specific. It's the target rate for unsecured loans between banks overnight.
Overnight. Between banks.
Yeah. Think of it like the plumbing of the banking system. Banks need to settle payments between each other every day. Sometimes a bank might be short on the cash needed for settlement, another might have excess. They lend to each other overnight in what's called the interbank market. The cash rate is the target for the interest on those loans. It's about managing liquidity, stability within that interbank system.
Right, so it's about banks balancing their own books with each other after the fact.
Exactly. It functions purely in that interbank settlement layer. It's a cost if a bank borrows overnight, a benefit if they lend excess funds. But, and this is key, it doesn't operate within the process of creating your mortgage or the deposit that came with it. That happened before any need for interbank settlement might arise.
So hang on. If the cash rate is just for banks borrowing from each other overnight, what direct link does it actually have to my mortgage rate? I mean, it sure seems linked when rates go up.
That's the core of it. And the finding here is stark. There is no direct, real, or mechanical linkage.
None, really.
Mechanically, no. Remember, the loan and deposit are created together, instantly. There's no funding source from customer deposits or the RBA or that overnight cash market at the point the loan is made.
The bank doesn't borrow at the cash rate to give me my mortgage.
Not at the moment of creation, no. The cash rate applies only to those later interbank overnight balances. It's a separate layer.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting then. Because, like I said, RBA moves. Banks move.
Yeah.
Often pretty quickly. If it's not the cash rate directly driving up the cost for the bank to create my loan money, what is setting the interest rate I actually pay? Why does it go up?
It comes down to commercial decisions by the banks. Pure and simple.
Commercial decisions. You mean profit?
Well, yes. It's based on things like their target profit margins. What return do they want to make? Also, market competition. What are the other banks charging? They keep an eye on each other.
Uh-huh.
And of course, your individual credit risk. How likely are you to repay?
Right. Okay. That makes sense. But can we walk through that? How does it work without the cash rate cost?
Sure, let's simplify it right down. Imagine a bank gives you a $100,000 loan. As we said, poof, a $100,000 deposit appears in your account. Let's just pretend, for simplicity, that deposit pays you zero interest.
Okay.
Now, the bank charges you, say, 5% interest on that loan. That's $5,000 a year gross revenue for the bank.
Got it. $5,000 income for them.
Now, what if they just decide to increase your rate to 6%?
Okay. Then they'd make $6,000 a year for me.
Exactly. That's an extra $1,000 in gross revenue for them. And here's the kicker. That $1,000 increase happened without any change in their funding cost at the point of creation. No deposit suddenly flowed out. No extra interbank borrowing was needed to make that happen. The income jump is purely from the loan itself.
So the interest they charge isn't directly tied to a cost set by the RBA.
Not in any mechanical cause and effect way at the point of creation, no.
Yeah.
The loan interest is income generated independently of the cash rate's operational function.
Right. So just to be absolutely crystal clear on this, the RBA cash rate isn't operationally involved when the bank creates my loan. So when my rate goes up after an RBA hike, it's not because the RBA has directly made my loan more expensive for the bank to fund.
Correct. Any link we see that correlation, it reflects, as the source puts it, strategic alignment. Banks choose to follow the RBA's signal.
They choose to align. It's not forced by the mechanics.
It appears to be a strategic choice, potentially coordinated, rather than an operational necessity driven by direct funding costs tied to the cash rate. And this leads to a pretty significant implication, doesn't it? If banks create the money and the RBA cash rate isn't mechanically setting the base cost, then who really holds the power to set the price of money you borrow?
The banks themselves.
Largely, yes. The conclusion drawn here is that monetary power, the power to price loans, is concentrated significantly within the commercial banks. The RBA's announcements might act more like a convenient reference point, a signal for banks to coordinate around.
A signal for coordination. So less about RBA dictating costs and more about banks moving together.
That seems to be the implication. It suggests they have quite a bit of discretion.
So what evidence points to this? Does it actually happen in the Australian market?
Well, the market conduct suggests yes. It's a highly concentrated market, right? We know that. The big four dominate. And our source points to the ACCC, the competition watchdog. Remember their review of the ANZ Suncorp deal in 2023?
Vaguely, yeah. What did they say?
They explicitly noted, and this is a quote, "There is an accommodative and synchronized approach between the major banks."
Accommodative and synchronized, meaning they play nice and move together on pricing.
Pretty much. The ACCC continued that this was not unexpected and is enabled by the oligopoly market.
Enabled by the oligopoly. So because there are only a few big players, they don't really need to compete hard on price.
That's the classic outcome in an oligopoly. Intense price wars hurt everyone's profit, so there's often an implicit understanding, a synchronized approach to keep margins healthy. They accommodate each other's pricing moves rather than aggressively undercutting.
Which means, for us borrowers,
It means the pressure to offer the absolute lowest rate might be significantly reduced. They can maintain higher margins on the loans they create.
so connecting the dots, the interest burden on my mortgage might be less about the RBA's direct influence on funding costs and more about, well, the market power and strategic pricing of the big banks in this oligopoly.
That's precisely the conclusion this analysis points towards. The power seems to rest more with the commercial banks setting their price in a market that lacks fierce competition.
Wow. Okay, let's wrap this up. This has been quite the journey. We started by questioning that common belief about the RBA cash rate directly driving mortgage rates. We found out banks actually create money when they lend. That was a good one.
Definitely.
And then we saw the cash rate operates in a totally different sphere, the interbank market. No direct mechanical link to loan creation, which led us to the idea that mortgage rates are really commercial decisions, driven by profit targets, risk, and crucially,
Market structure. That oligopoly, which, according to the ACCC, leads to accommodative and synchronized pricing, less competition, potentially higher rates for borrowers than otherwise. And thinking about this, it really does force us to reconsider a lot, doesn't it? How effective is monetary policy if the transmission isn't direct? How much real competition exists? Where's the accountability? And maybe the biggest question for you, the listener, What does it mean for your finances, your budget, when the price of the money you borrow seems to be set so firmly by a handful of commercial banks who create that money themselves?
That is definitely something to chew on. Think about that next time you see interest rates move. This has
Ah,
been the deep dive, getting into the real mechanics of money and power in banking. Thanks for joining us.